I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the Macquarie University land, the Wadawurrung clan of the Darug Nation, whose cultures and customs have nurtured and continue to nurture the land since the Dreamtime. We pay our respects to elders past, present, and future. And I guess after that, I'd just like to say welcome. For those of you who might be wondering, who is this person in front of me? Speaking on behalf of the Marketing Club, where is David Cyrus? Well, I just want to let you know that you're in the right place, not to worry. David has in fact graduated, so congratulations to him. And the club has kindly voted me the new club president. So thank you, hello, and I look forward to getting to know more of you. On behalf of the club leadership team, we are grateful to have you all here today and are super excited to share with you tonight's event, Unravelling the Media and Marketing Landscape with the knowledgeable Damian Francis. As you'll see, he should be on your screen right now. There you go, thanks for the wave there. So Damian is actually an MQ alum. He completed his undergrad and honours with Macquarie, so he's very familiar with the shoes some of us are in today. Damian is also recognised as a media professional with almost 20 years of experience in both print and digital journalism, public relations, corporate communications, content curation, and live events with specialisation in media and marketing. I just need to hold my breath there, but yeah. Damian has led editorial and content teams, launched new brands to market, and interviewed some of the biggest names in the industry, including S4 Capital founder Sir Martin Sorrell and Airbnb's former global communications lead, Dylan Smith. Today, Damian is part of the leadership team that runs Mumbrella, Australia's leading media and marketing publisher. He's head of content and helps run the largest industry event of the year, Mumbrella 360. And as you may have seen through our event promotions, we have some extremely significant giveaways, which Damian will talk to soon. Now, before I hand over, please note this event is being recorded. Some of you have shared your concerns about privacy, so we will leave it to you regarding the use of your cameras. But please do feel free to show your lovely faces so we can warmly welcome our special guest speaker. This is an interactive session, so please use your reaction buttons, comment in the chat box, and have your questions ready for the Q&A segment. Now, without further delay, I'll hand over to our key speaker, Damian Francis. Please make him feel welcomed.
Thank you so much, Jess. Much appreciated. Congratulations to you on being nominated president. And thank you so much for having me back at the Macquarie Business School Marketing Club. As you said, Jess, it's been quite some time since I was at Macquarie. I think it was 2005. That I graduated. So this is where you all say, God, he looks young. How could it be that long ago? But unfortunately, it was that long ago, and it has been quite a career for me. So I appreciate coming back. It's fantastic to speak to you all. Thank you for coming tonight. For those who are watching the recording, thank you for spending the time. A bit of an apology from me. I'm a little bit sick at the moment. I've got two kids who went back to school and daycare and promptly caught a significant cold and passed it on to their parents. So we have been COVID tested and we're clear, but I might be dad coughing from time to time. So apologies for that and any background noise that the kids may have who are in a couple of rooms away. As Jess said, I'm Damian Francis. I'm the head of content and editorial at Mumbrella, which is the leading media and marketing publication in Australia. I've spent probably 10 years in media and marketing journalism, starting as the editor of Ad News back in 2012. And this evening, I want to give you a bit of a broad look at the industry, the trade media, and sort of what's been happening in the last 18 months, because it's been a pretty interesting 18 months. So come along for the ride. Hopefully you'll get a lot out of it. Please feel free to answer any questions that you may have at all. It's kind of a journalist's worst nightmare to have something recorded, because we always love things to be off the record, particularly when we're saying them. But great that we're recording it. Great that people can watch back. And like I say, please do ask any questions that you want to believe. We're going to have some Q&A at the end. So Being the great journo I am, I'm going to now attempt to share my screen, which is always problematic, but I think I should be able to do it without too many issues. I think it's working now. If it's not, please do give me a yell. But here we go. Right. So I'm going to start off with the good news. Essentially, is that you've picked an industry. Some of you may work in it already. Others starting to be part of it. You've picked an industry in rude health, as they say. Now, by that I mean that, according to one of the big agencies in the industry, Zenith, the worth of the Australian advertising industry, which of course is powered by media and marketing, this year alone, COVID year, of course, $15.59 billion Australian. So it's huge. It's been super strong through the pandemic. And of course, advertising affects multiple industries, whether it's creative advertising, media, including what I do, journalism, media buyers, marketing, the technology sector. It affects every single industry. So to have such a strong year, despite all the challenges we've had, it is a pretty exciting thing for us. Now, it's a finely balanced ecosystem, and it has been disrupted over the last 18 months or so. But I would argue that it's not really just the pandemic that's disrupted it. There's been a lot going on from different areas. What the pandemic's probably done is it's probably accelerated a lot of that disruption. That disruption was already happening anyway. And so what's happened is it's just going faster now. Consumers are changing rapidly, budgets are changing rapidly, technology is changing rapidly. And so as a result, a lot of what was going to happen over arguably the next 5 to 10 years has probably happened over the last 18 months. So what does that mean for what I do? Like Jess said, Mumbrella, the leading trade media operator. And when I say trade media, that just means we report on the media and marketing industry. Now, we generally have around 1 million page views a month. This is a big industry. So there's a lot of people reading Mumbrella, and there's a lot of people reading our competition as well. What we do multiple industry conferences, particularly prior to COVID. We were running 14 or 15 industry conferences a year. Obviously, our website, mumbrella.com.au, as well as our subscription site, Mumbrella Pro, and industry awards, things like that. So that's Mumbrella in a nutshell. So what would I suggest you do with that information? If you're not already, get involved in the trade media. Get signed up to the newsletters, listen to the podcasts, read what's going on. I'm absolutely sure that a number of you already are. So this may be old news to you, but you know, jump on Mumbrella's daily newsletter, go and sign up at mumbrella.com.au, and you know, jump on the competitors as well. I'm certainly not going to say to you that you shouldn't read the competitors. You should read as many of them as you possibly can without ruining your productivity. So Ad News, B&T, MI3, Campaign, Marketing Week, there are heaps. There are also obviously a lot in the UK and the US as well. And don't ignore the globals. You may want to work in Europe or the US at some stage, or a different market. Keep up to date with what's going on there. There's a new one on the scene as well, unmade.media, which is done by Mumbrella's founder, Tim Burrows. Jump on that. It's a Substack newsletter. Definitely give it a read. There's some really interesting stuff in there, and he's quite personal about it. But also the podcast, you know, we're starting to get back to normal daily life and our commutes, our train to work or to uni or driving, etc. Great time to listen to podcasts. You know, check out the Mumbrella Cast. A new one's dropped today. It drops every Thursday. But also listen again to the others. I Love Pivot, Scott Galloway, Professor Scott Galloway, and Cara Swisher. Great podcast about business, tech, jumps into advertising and marketing as well. The IAB also, Interactive Advertising Bureau, who operate across different regions. There's an Australian version, of course, so check out some of those. It's a little bit dry, but if you really like Martech and you're into digital advertising, it's super informative. If you can get over a bit of the dryness, it's super informative. So do check them out. I hope you find them to be a good use of your time. So why is the trade media important? Why should you care? Why are you listening to me now? All very pertinent questions. Hopefully I'm somewhat entertaining, and I get more entertaining throughout the next half hour or so. We'll see. You can rate me or something like that. I don't know. But the trade media is important because we keep the industry honest. We do what media does in general. We do what the SMH does to politicians or news.com.au or the Australian or the AFR. A lot of people say to me, isn't the trade media meant to support the industry? And I'd say that's fundamentally a flawed statement. We are there to keep the industry honest. We're a critical friend of the industry. We support the industry in that we keep an eye on what's going on and what's important to anyone in the industry, not just the CEOs, not just the C-suite, but the first years, the middle ranks, anyone involved in the industry. And we report on it in as much detail as we possibly can. We ask the hard questions. We're in a very privileged position where people like me and the 10 staff that we have on the editorial and content team on Umbrella, we get time with CEOs, with chair people, with leadership teams at some of the biggest brands, biggest agencies, biggest media owners in Australia. As people, we don't really deserve that. So it's a bit of a privilege for us. So it's our duty to ask the hard questions, to represent all of the industry, not just the top level. And so what you see on your screen here is just a really small snapshot of some of the more challenging stories that we've written and that we do. Whether it's about staff salaries, whether it's about cheating in awards, whether it's about inappropriate job adverts, whatever it happens to be, we sort of jump in head first and try and keep the industry honest. So that's why I hope the industry feels that the trade media is important. And that's why I hope you guys read us and the competition on a daily basis to keep involved, to keep in the loop, and also get in touch with us. Drop me a line, drop our journos a line. Whenever you need to talk about something or make something known, please do it. And of course, you can do it anonymously if you so wish. So moving on, as Jess alluded to, a bit of a competition today to hopefully get you to sign up as well to Mumbrella, but get you involved in the Mumbrella ecosystem. Mumbrella 360, it's Australia's largest media and marketing conference, and fingers crossed, touch everything. Hopefully, Sydney, July 2021 next year, we will be back. We will be back in person. There won't be any restrictions around that. Hopefully, it's huge. It's usually about 3,000 people. It's across 3 levels of the Hilton Hotel. There's 6 streams of content. There's so many different speakers from around the world, local markets, different levels. They could be talking about anything to do with the media and marketing industry, hence the hugely original name of Mumbrella 360. Tickets are anywhere between $1,000 and $2,500, so they're not cheap. Admittedly, if I were a student, I certainly wouldn't be spending my money on a Mumbrella 360 ticket. I'll be quite honest with you. But people in the industry, they love to come, especially when the company pays. So what I want to do is give away 3 2-day passes to the event. Pretty simple entry mechanism. Sign up for the Mumbrella newsletter. If some of you may already have, if you have, great. You can still enter. And just email me. My email address is there, damian@mumbrella.com.au, using the email address that you have signed up for, and answer in 50 words, what would you like to see at Mumbrella 360? That's all you have to do. Pretty simple. We'll keep it open for a couple of weeks and give you enough time to give people who are watching this on repeat enough time. So 2 weeks from today, Jess and I can probably calculate exactly what date that is and circulate that around. And then we'll pick 3 winners of that. So do get involved and jump in on that. Right. Enough about Mumbrella and the trade media. I'll move on to what you guys are probably more interested in, the media and marketing industry as a whole. And I wanted to touch on a few of the main areas of media and marketing and just give you a bit of an update of what's happened over the past 18 months, where it sits and how that may affect you now or in the future. And so I'll start with arguably the most dynamic of the sectors, which is the creative agencies, the agencies which are creating the quirky ads and executions for brands. Now, what's happened in the past 18 months, it's a super crowded market at the moment, really, really crowded market. There are new players coming out left, right, and center. It's all happening in creative. There are huge account moves as well from some of the biggest brands in the industry also. Now, what's brought that on? Essentially, the fact that there was a lot of uncertainty towards the middle of last year. There was a lot of agencies that made very early moves that were defensive in terms of the pandemic hit. There was a lot of uncertainty. Obviously, budgets have to be protected. And so the first thing that happened was they lost their jobs, or they were stood down, or they had to work longer hours to make up for the people who had been stood down. It was quite a hectic few months. And it was only a few months because, like I said before, we've rebounded quite quickly in this industry. But it was a hectic few months. And what happened there was a lot of very key people decided that enough was enough, and it was time to create their own business. And so we've seen a lot of creative leaders step away and start independent agencies and bring across a few staff and bring across some key accounts. One of the key ones that happened partly as a result of the pandemic and the way that the agency was handling the pandemic was the creation of an independent agency called Howitson and White. Now, that's led by Chris Howitson, who was the former CEO of CHE Proximity, part of Clemenger Group. And Chris Howitson decided that it was time to up sticks from Clemenger Group and start his own agency. He's one of the foremost people in the industry, huge fame, huge reputation. And he started that with the creative lead at CHE Proximity at the time, a chap by the name of Ant White. That's actually changed a little bit already. You know, change is continually happening in the industry. Ant White stepped aside 8 months after the business started and has become Howitson and Company. So they've taken a few big clients. They're working with major brands like Belong, for example, you know, part of Telstra. And they're doing big things. So it's a crowded market. What else have we seen in creative? Now, the other things that we've seen, and this sort of runs along most of the industry, but I'll touch on it here anyway, is the talent shortage. There was a lot of movement last year, again, in that few months where I guess the best way to describe it was panic struck. And what happened was people moved, and then agencies realized they didn't want to lose people, and big offers were made to keep people. And so what we're seeing now is that $15.59 billion industry, which is having more and more money injected in it, more and more projects happening, more and more work going on, needs more and more people. Shock horror. And those people just aren't there. Now, this isn't necessarily an immigration thing, but this is just a blood clot almost in the flow of talent throughout the industry. Brands and agencies are paying now over the odds to keep people, which means competitive agencies who are trying to hire people are finding it really, really hard to find new talent, to poach people, because they're not moving anymore. A, they want the certainty of a role, and during the pandemic, certainty was a good thing. And B, they've been offered so much money anyway that it's not really worth them moving. So again, that's not just creative, it's across the board, but it's a big issue for creatives right now. So what else is happening in the creative landscape? They're still battling with small budgets, and what I mean by that, ANZ, Australia, New Zealand, you know, we're a small market and we have smaller budgets. So it forces them to be, in a sense, more creative. We're probably one of the hardest hitting regions globally in terms of what we do for the money that we have. So it's a really dynamic sector, and it's a sector that punches way above its weight in terms of the type of executions you see, the type of work that you see, the type of awards that these guys are winning. But again, creative, hunting for new opportunities. They're looking for expansion. Where can they go after just TVCs, for example, or display ads? Creative is starting to move into areas like public relations, into basic media buying, into more services outside of creative. So it's a really interesting area at the moment. I will move on to the next one, knowing that I'm quickly winding down the clock. Media agencies. Now, this is a really interesting sector, and you know, I probably should have said this before, but obviously the reason why I'm picking these big sectors is obviously with marketers. Marketers touch every aspect here, so they really should know about all of these areas in detail. But media agencies, so the agencies that control the spend, the ones that buy the media, it's a super fascinating area at the moment. And it's largely led in Australia by big agencies that are part of what we call holdcos, holding companies, the big networks, the WPPs, the IPGs, the publicist groups. So you've got the big agencies within those groups operating in Australia with massive clients, global clients as well as local clients. But what we've seen in the last 18 months is really interesting in that we saw a lot of big independent media agencies being bought by the big holdcos. Match Media, for example, which became Blue 44.9, which is part of the Publicist Group. And then the most recent Highland Media, run by the Virginia Highland, which is now part of Havas Media. And Virginia is now the CEO over there. But what it meant was it didn't actually create the death of independent media agencies. It actually created more opportunities. So what we saw was, and the picture there shows that the IMAA, the Independent Media Agency Association, and there are more now independent media agencies coming to the fore and doing big things. Groups like None Media, led by Chris Walton, for example. So it's a really dynamic sector. It's a crowded market, and it has a lot of challenges. When you talk about sectors, this is probably the sector that has the most challenges in the market. And I've touched on a few of them that I've written down just there. Transparency, one of the big ones. And when I say transparency, what do I mean by that? I mean, where, as a marketer, where are your dollars going? What deals have the media agencies done with the media owners? How much are they charging the marketers for that? And how much are they being charged by the media owners? How much money are they making on top of it? And where are your dollars actually going? So there's big transparency challenges there. There's revenue challenges. Are the clients, are they paying enough money? Are those global clients, are they being forced on some of the local agencies in a global deal, which means less money for the local agency? There's some really interesting questions over there. But also, media agencies are becoming better at discussing issues with the industry, better at reaching out to people. So we're seeing better work between media agencies and creative agencies and public relations agencies. The old adage sort of 5 years ago was that a media agency executive wouldn't have a clue what a creative agency executive did, but I don't think that's true anymore. There's a lot more of a proper ecosystem now of working together, of understanding what each other does. And I think that's really important at the moment, being that there's so much complexity now in the industry. So I'll move on quickly to marketers, potentially what a lot of people on this chat are doing or want to do. Now, I've started with what might seem like a bit of a blow, but really it's kind of not. You know, as I said before, we're dealing with lower budgets in ANZ generally, but the work is strong. There's a varying scale of freedom when it comes to what the local marketers can do, whether they have to stick very strictly to what the US or Europe is doing, or whether they have a lot more scale to do what they want to do and really tailor their campaigns and their marketing pushes to the local market. To give you an example, the automotive industry is probably one of the worst offenders in copying global campaigns, European or US in particular campaigns, where you see your left-hand drive cars and American people in American cities. But a lot of the FMCGs, a lot of the retailers, Audi, for example, does some great local campaigns run by BMF, actually, who are just really well tailored to the local market. But what we've also seen there is the new opportunities coming from technology, coming from big data, coming from new levels of Martech have put significant pressure on ROI expectations. There's an expectation now that marketers can account for every cent that goes out. And not only that, seeing significant returns on every cent that's being spent. There's still a divide between the CMO and the marketing group that they're working with, and arguably the C-suite if they're not part of that C-suite. And unfortunately, there is still a gap between whether the CMO should be part of that leadership management team within some companies. Generally, we're getting there where the CMO is part of that leadership group, but unfortunately, it's not always a given. So there's sometimes undue pressure on the CMO and the marketers in that regard. And what does that lead to? Well, that leads to short tenures for CMOs, very short tenures, 2.5 to 3 years potentially. When you're talking about some of the big campaigns, the big executions, the big goals that brands have to join, to get more consumers, to join consumers together, to create relationships, 2.5 years isn't enough. 3 years, certainly not enough. We have seen a few marketers 4, 5, 6 years. It's uncommon. There's a lot of movement, unfortunately. So hopefully we start to see a bit of a ending of that trend. And like I say, it's a bit of an interesting time with Martech and with the agencies and how that's all rolling around, because one of the big issues as well is who leads the charge here, particularly with Martech. Is it the agency? Is it the brand? Is it the Martech provider themselves? And whoever's leading it, do they really know what a brand needs to be successful and to get the results that they need? So super interesting discussion there. But the good thing is for marketers, they still really are the center of the media marketing landscape. They've got the goals, they're controlling the budgets, they're the ones who choose the agencies they work with, and hopefully they're the ones that are having significant input into where those campaigns go, what they do, who they touch. So really interesting landscape there. So moving on to the opportunities and the challenges right now, and how may this affect you? Well, there's a few, particularly from a cultural perspective, an employee perspective right now. And like I mentioned before, in my very humble opinion, and I think it's an opinion shared by many people, there was a significant overreaction to the pandemic at the start. And I think the majority of the industry was guilty of that in terms of quickly making redundancies, quickly making stand downs, assuming that the worst was going to happen, that they were going to lose clients, they were going to lose work, they were going to lose budget. And what actually happened was something completely different. What actually happened was there was a tough 2 or 3 months, and then budgets started coming back really, really quickly. Marketing spend started coming back, because even though we might have been in lockdown or we were in and out of lockdown, things like that, people were still buying online. People were still having to, particularly FMCG, Coles, Woolies were doing really, really well. A lot of those stores with good online presence were doing really well. Obviously, there were some industries hit quite hard. Travel, for example, hugely hit. But pharma, really good. So there was a lot of industries doing really good. Weird industries that you wouldn't expect doing really good. The automotive industry, suddenly selling more cars than they had for years and years and years, having supply issues even. So it was a fantastic rebound. But unfortunately, that overreaction hurt the industry. But it does mean it's an employee market at the moment, which is great. If you're looking for a role, if you're looking to move role, it's a fantastic time to really consider that. You may have heard people talk about the great resignation. It's a bit of a US thing at the moment. Scott Galloway was one of the people who sort of said, no, it's a great reassessment. People naturally are reassessing their situation. People like me, people like you potentially, reassessing your situation, having spent so much time at home, having spent more time with your friends, your family, your loved ones, having reassessed how you work from home. Of course, you're going to think about what that means for you, what that means for your career, what that means for 2022. So there's big change in the market, but it's being led by employees at the moment, and it's a great opportunity for employees in the market. Like I say, the other big opportunity and / challenge is Martech, because it's a really challenging marriage between marketing and technology at the moment. Technology skills, again, in my humble opinion, I would suggest that technology skills are lacking in our industry in general, not just from marketers. But it's one of those areas where marketers are being so pressed at the moment. The agencies they're working with are being so pressed at the moment that upskilling is quite difficult. Finding that time to upskill is quite difficult. Finding employers who are willing to give employees the opportunity to upskill is quite difficult. But anyone who can get deeper into Martech and really understand the opportunities and how to read it and what to do with all that data that is coming through has a really good opportunity at the moment, as we see this large battle between the big tech guys like Adobe, like Salesforce, like Microsoft, and also little indies that are popping up. Mutiny is one of them, a small business in Australia run by a young guy called Henry Innes. There's a lot of opportunity here, and whoever really understands it and can really drive it is up for a really good opportunity. There'll be people knocking on your door left, right, and centre. A good example, a chap by the name of Ben Shepherd, who's former PwC, former CHE Proximity, former Tinkerbell, probably the foremost in terms of knowing how to dissect data, what to do with it, what's important. People are just knocking his door down to try and get him to work with them because he knows so much. And there are a lot of examples of that. So, part of it is, particularly if you haven't entered the industry at the moment, or if you're at the start of your journey, one of the big questions you might want to ask yourself, if you are so inclined, how can you play a bigger role in this changing environment? What are the opportunities that it's bringing you? And maybe Martech is one of them. You might have seen some of the big media owners at the moment, 9, 7, 10. Every year they run up fronts where they discuss their year moving forward, the big shows they're going to do. Now, 5 years ago, that was all about, here are the big shows. That's it. Now it's led by, here are our big integrations with Martech, Adobe in particular, and 9, Salesforce and 10 CBS Viacom. Here's what we're doing. Here's how we're making the marketer and the agency job even easier by allowing you to buy even quicker. And here's the data you're going to get from those. So that integration has just been so key at the moment. Let me move on. Another opportunity, brand purpose and social expectations. And I think this is probably one where everyone's got an opinion on this. Purpose. How should a brand lead purpose? What role does it have in marketing? Can it really drive results? Does it provide connection to the audience? Should a brand really be getting political, be involved in purpose? The image there, one of the great brands when it comes to really following through with purpose is Patagonia. Fantastic brand. But, statistically speaking, we know young consumer sets want to connect with brands who are purpose-led, but an older demographic doesn't necessarily care about that. And statistically, again, they have the most money to spend. So what is the alignment between brand and purpose? And so over the last 18 months, particularly with the pandemic, has been such a key talking point. Brands backing vaccination, for example. Is it a brand's job to back vaccination, to encourage people to get a jab, particularly if they have nothing to do with health, for example? We've seen brands like NAB and the TAB, and they come to mind because they both stole each other's line of turning their brands into jab, very original stuff coming from them. But, where does a brand sit? Now, I would suggest to you that one of the best arguments I've heard from a key marketer, a chap who used to lead the marketing of koala mattresses, no less, Peter Sloterdijk, who's American, and he said during one of the Umbrella events, a brand fundamentally can't get involved in purpose unless the employees there really believe in it, and not only believe in it, are actively involved in it. And if they are, then they can drive purpose. But if they're not, then who can really drive that purpose, because none of them are actually relating to it properly. So it's a really interesting conversation at the moment. I would argue that a lot of the brands who are outwardly getting involved in purpose-driven strategies aren't necessarily those which have the staff behind them to really drive that forward. But it's a really interesting area at the moment, and one that no doubt probably everyone in this conversation will at some stage be a part of or get to experience. So yeah, coming to the end, because I am very quickly running down the clock, unfortunately. I tend to talk too long. Surprise, a journalist who talks too long. What to expect next year? What should we be expecting in 2022? I hate future casing, but I'm going to do it anyway for giggles. The talent squeeze is going to continue, absolutely. Opening of borders isn't going to change things. I guarantee you that. I will put money on that. It's not going to change things. It will still be an employee market next year. So again, for you, if you're an employee who's looking for opportunities or reassessing, it's going to be a good time for you. Consumer spend could go either way at the moment. We're seeing great spend at the moment because work from home, we've saved a lot of money. So many people doing renovations that, there's a lot of loose change there. But look, property prices are going up. People are going back to the office. They're having to pay for transport again. They're having to pay for daycare and the things that they didn't have to pay for before. They're having to pay for petrol again, etc. So consumer spend could go either way. That obviously affects marketing and the marketing spend as well. So stay tuned for that one. There will be more consolidation in the agency landscape. That's a fact. That's going to happen. I can guarantee you that. There's not one holdco out there that I know of who's not actively looking for acquisition opportunities. But in saying that, I would also suggest that more independent agencies are going to crop up to fill the space of those acquisitions as well. And finally, the big tech is going to be an even bigger challenge next year. If you don't know about the News Media Bargaining Code or the Digital Advertising Services Inquiry, ACCC initiatives, News Media Bargaining Code, very briefly, the major media organizations largely getting funding from the major tech platforms, Google and Facebook, finally getting a bit of money for them being able to get advertising revenue from the content of these news organizations. That still carries on. Digital Advertising Services Inquiry, the realization that 90% of digital advertising passes through Google. And how is that good for the industry? Well, pretty strong argument that it's not. But how do you change that? Hasn't the gate been open for far too many years, and all the animals have run out by now? So how do we change that? How do we affect that? That's going to be a massive issue next year as well. So the final report's only been released recently, a couple of months ago, and that will continue. And I would argue that the only option there is actually divestment of Google, but that's another story completely. And then I'll leave you with the proliferation of digital habits as well. Connected TVs, where are consumers? What are they watching? How are they using their smartphones? What does that mean for digital marketing in particular, and marketers and their strategies as well? So a lot to go through next year, led by technology. And that's it. That's the end of my spiel. I hope you've got something from that. I hope I haven't run too quickly through it. If you have any questions, I think we're going to go to questions now. I can see there's a few comments in the chat potentially, which I'll open up soon. But do feel free to contact me at any stage if you have any questions or you want to ask anything off the record. I'm more than happy to answer questions. But I'll go into the chat now and have a look and see what we've got here. You might be able to hear my youngest son in the background, so apologies for that. He's quite loud for a 3-year-old. What's the best, Riley, good question. What's the best way to upskill with Martech and upskill my teams with such tools? Yeah, really, really good question. Look, there's various ways. There's courses, obviously, from people like ADMA, from the IAB. There's courses from the Martech providers themselves, from the Microsofts, from the Adobes, from the Salesforce. I think the first challenge is to really do the research and figure out, is the Martech you're using now the right Martech for you? do you have an opportunity to change? You may or may not. And if you, regardless then, is whatever I'm using after that, after I've made those assessments, where am I going to find that training? Now, like I said, I would probably start with the Martech provider themselves. What better way to get up to speed than to actually get up to speed with the platform that you are using? And I would reverse engineer it as well. What do you need? What do you need from that platform? What do you want from it? And then ask them, how do I get that? What's the easiest way to get that? And in terms of your team, the question on teams, I think everyone in the team should be doing that training, no matter how senior or junior you are. The quicker you get into that, the better. So look, Riley, I hope that's answered your question in that, go to the provider first and then have a look at some of the other industry bodies, for example, like I say, IAB, ADMA, ADMA. What are they offering, and can that answer your questions? Moving on, Anthony, interesting that the older generation, wealthier audience don't care as much for responsible businesses versus the new generation. Yeah, absolutely. How's Umbrella making way for supporting sustainability and purpose-led companies? Yeah, look, good question. Look, our job is not necessarily to support sustainability and purpose-led companies, but it's to provide the conversation around sustainability and purpose-led companies. So one of the big conversations that are happening right now, which is a news item that we are following, is how agencies are dealing with their clients and whether their clients are sustainable or not, whether they're purpose-driven or not, whether they're good for the environment or not, pretty simply speaking. And so what's happened there is a lot of agencies are putting in place rules of engagement, essentially. We won't deal with clients who don't meet certain criteria. Now, this is not all of them, and the criteria, they vary because obviously there's money at stake here. And so we are trying to cover as much of that conversation as possible and bring it to light and make sure that it's at the center of the discussions in media and marketing. So hopefully, Anthony, that answers your questions. Moving on. Matt Ward, News Media Bargaining Code, very interesting topic, agreed. Could you elaborate on how we would provide a solution? Wow, Matt, big question. How would we provide a solution? Well, that depends on which side you're on. So that's probably the first fundamental question, Matt, is whose side are you on? Are you on the platform side or are you on the media side? Now I'll dilute this and make it really basic. The super basic argument is that media organizations, they create great content. They share that content on platforms, Facebook, Google. Google and Facebook get huge amounts of revenue from that. So that's a bit of a black mark. But the news organizations get huge amount of traffic from that, which they can then monetize. But then there's an argument of, oh, if the brand can get their brand across that content through Google and Facebook, potentially at a cheaper price, programmatic advertising, then, so maybe I won't spend it with the news organization. So solution, what's the solution? Who's right, who's wrong? Well, I'm not going to provide a who's right, who's wrong. I'm a journalist. I'm probably biased in who's right and who's wrong. You can probably tell whose side I'm on. Look, the News Media Bargaining Code isn't essentially being enforced at the moment because Google and Facebook have been quite smart and they've done individual deals with a lot of the major news organizations, tens of millions of dollars worth, allegedly, to the major news organizations like Nine, like Seven, like Private Media, like Australian Community Media. So that is essentially the solution they've come up with at the moment, is they're getting tens of millions of dollars of funding. Now, good and bad. The good is these media organizations have a lot more money and hopefully that will translate into more jobs. We've already seen businesses like Nine, they've started to create new cadetships and things like that, things we haven't seen for quite some time. There are new jobs popping up. What's the negative? Well, the negative is Google and Facebook don't have a huge incentive to talk with some of the medium to small media owners. So a lot feel like they're getting left out. Tim Duggan, the guy who started Junkie way back when, has now exited the business and created the Digital Publishers Association, the DPA. And I think a lot of people there thought, hey, the DPA will start to argue for smaller publishers to get a slice of the pie from News Media Bargaining Code. It hasn't happened like that. But I think we'll start to see a little bit more happening, but it may not be good. For example, SBS recently got shut down by Facebook in trying to negotiate. Now, hey, they're pretty massive. So there's still a lot to play out there. Solution in that some of those deals have been made, but more needs to happen. And essentially the path that the media owners and the platforms have decided is that they'll throw money at them, but they need to throw more money at more people, I would argue. Alex, thank you. You're more than welcome, Alex. Let's see. Anthony and Riley, my pleasure. Matt, yeah, good. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I agree with you. You can't favour a certain side at the moment. It's such a challenging situation. Emily, what do you look for when hiring someone in your industry, both at a managerial level and at an entry level? Emily, I've unfortunately had to hire a completely new editorial team over the last 18 months because, like every other media business, we've been part of that talent shortage. Our people have moved on to bigger jobs and we've had to find new people. So what do I look for when hiring someone in the industry? Look, from a journalism perspective, I would suggest that the biggest challenge is curiosity. And I'd suggest that probably goes across industries. Do you actually care about what you're doing? Do you care about the media marketing industry? Do you care about the brand you're trying to work for, the agency that you want to join? You know, why? Why do you care aside from taking home a pay packet? People who are genuinely involved, genuinely invested, they're the people you're trying to look for. How do you find those people? You ask the basic questions, really. Tell me a bit about the industry. Tell me a bit about how you connect with the industry. Tell me a bit about why it's important to you. How long have you been interested in it? Very quickly, you find out who's personally invested and who's not. You know, if you're jumping into the media marketing industry from the start, you've got 30 odd years, 40 years potentially in this industry. You really got to love it. You got to know why you're taking part. And so that's what I look for. Someone who's genuinely invested, who can talk about it like it's a hobby, like they really enjoy it. They don't have to know everything. No one knows everything, especially at the start of their career. I learn something new every day, but you know, can you sense that investment from them? So, Emily, I hope that answers your question. Now I'm going to absolutely butcher this name. Tejas. Oh God, I hope I've got that right. Apologies.
That's pretty correct. Yeah, that's pretty accurate.
Oh, look at that. Fantastic. I mentioned AUNZ, really good at squeezing value out of every dollar. Yeah, absolutely. Can you talk more about that? Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. And it's a good question. Look, we're used to using small budgets because on a per capita basis, 25 million people or so in Australia, 5 million people or whatever it happens to be in New Zealand. That's a population of Canada, which in itself is a small market. You know, forget about comparing it to the US or the UK, where the majority of these budgets are run from. And so what you see happening is people just thinking outside of the box because they have to. They can't afford multi-million-dollar campaigns. They can't afford big shows, you know, big production sets. They have to think really, really creatively. So yeah, what's an example? Hey, many years ago, Commonwealth Bank, now who I'd argue actually do have pretty big budgets comparatively speaking. But for a week, Commonwealth Bank, just before they changed their logo and their and the word escapes me now, of course, because I'm trying to find it. But essentially, how they were explaining their brand. Now, I think we all know CommBank now runs by the word can. It's all about can. Now, when they were launching that, they sent out a big barge with the word can on it for a week in Sydney Harbour. And no one knew what the hell that was. What, you know, and everyone was talking about it. Sports betting, the TAB were taking bets on who this was for, what it was all about, what the hell is going on here, you know, this big barge just randomly floating around. So many people talking about it. And then, of course, it was revealed that it was the new CommBank logo, and the amount of conversation after that. You know, for the price of a barge and a few big letters, that was $1 million of value that was provided to CommBank for that execution. And we've seen plenty of that happening, you know, plenty of those cool, quirky, unique ideas. I don't know if you guys know, Dumb Ways to Die, McCann Group, John Mescal, who did that probably 10 years ago now. Now, John Mescal is big time in the US now because of essentially this campaign for Metro Melbourne. Essentially, we don't want people dying on the rails. Hey, good call. And they produced a cartoon of Dumb Ways to Die. Just random stuff, getting bitten by a snake, jumping out of a plane and your parachute fails, playing with knives, just weird stuff like that. They made this cartoon and it went viral. It would have been super cheap to make that cartoon. Now, of course, they didn't know it was going to go viral, but that creativity, it was all about just that creativity and having that initiative, that belief that they could do something different. So that, I hope that gives you an example of, you know, some of the cool things that Australian and New Zealand agencies and brands have done. You know, they just think outside the box, and it's really cool. Now, let's see. Emily, competition is tough. Do you support the need for a portfolio, proof of work? Should I be looking at their LinkedIn or just stick to the interviews and find the right person? Emily, you should be doing what's right for you for the particular job. You know, if you're a creative agency and you're hiring a creative rather than a strategist, for example, yeah, you probably want to see a portfolio of work. You probably want them to have gone to award school. You probably want to see some, work experience, for example, strategist or a buyer or something like that. Different situation. Yeah, you know, maybe it is just interviews or LinkedIn. Look, you know, competition is tough. If you're looking for a job, again, like I said, the market's right for you at the moment, but go in with everything you've got. You know, show them why, show them that connection, like I was saying before, that connection of you and the brand or the agency and why you care. And if you're hiring, super tough. And I would say that the people who are doing well in hiring now, like I said, people finding those connections, but people also who are not just hiring for the sake of hiring because they can't find anyone. You know, do the extra work, take the extra few weeks or the extra month or whatever it is. If the vacancy has to be open for a little bit longer, maybe it has to be open for a little bit longer, if that's possible, to find the right person for the job. They're out there, you'll find them at some stage. But yeah, like I said, it depends on the role itself. So hopefully that's answered your question, Emily. If you have a specific job example, please feel free to chuck that in the chat. Isabella, in your own opinion, not to be influenced by what work you think is right, what is your #1 tip for turning heads? Connection with your audience. Who is your audience? Do you understand your audience and what they want? You're not going to turn their heads unless you understand who they are and what they want. How are you going to figure that out? Research, your database, surveys, results from your past campaigns, talking to the market. That's what you need to do. You need to understand your audience. That is the primary concern for marketers. Understand the audience. Now, when you understand the audience, then you will get a much better understanding of what will turn their head, whether that's shock and awe, throwing something completely different their way, or whether that's giving them something that you know they're going to like and that you know they're going to relate to. You know, we're building communities here. Marketers are building communities, and you can't build a community unless you really understand the people in that community. So if you believe that you understand your audience, you will have a much better opportunity to turn heads. But I would also preface that with turn heads for the right reasons. You know, it's very easy to go, I'm just going to throw something out that's going to go viral or it's going to get a lot of interest. Why are you doing it? What's your goal here? You know, is it for sales? Is it for sales? And it could be. Is it to engage more people? Is it to get people into a discussion? What is it? Why are you doing that? And that will help in what you do as well. I think I have run to the bottom of all the chat questions, which is fantastic questions. So thank you everyone for throwing them in. I'm more than happy to take any more questions if anyone is game enough to unmute and ask anything. Please feel free. Or just shut me up and all good.
I was going for the latter, but
that's fair.
Look, I might just ask one question that basically summarizes everything and why we're here today. If you could just give us, I mean, you've obviously given us plenty of advice, but if you had just one thing that you could say to upcoming, professionals who want to be in this marketing and media space, what would that be? And if this is a plug from Umbrella, I mean, go for it. But
no, I'm not gonna. I've plugged Umbrella enough. What's the most important thing? The most important thing in my mind is to understand that this is a very, very complex industry, and it's an industry that you're going to take a long time to understand properly, and arguably you will never fully understand it. I mean, I sit here in front of you today, like Jess, you said earlier, with 20 years of journalism experience and 10 years of analysing this industry, and I still learn something new every day. There are so many facets of this industry. Keep your mind open and be honest with yourself that you may understand the basics, but there are so many more facets within that. And do your best, if you're truly engaged in the industry, do your best to, in your own time, when you can, within reason, get to understand those parts of the industry, or those other areas. What's programmatic advertising? What's arbitrage? What's big tech? What's the digital advertising services inquiry? And who does it affect and why should I care? The more knowledge is power. It's such a cliche thing, but especially in this industry. The more you know, the more you can converse. And as we all know, this is an industry that loves networking, that loves communication. We're a communication-based industry. The more you know, the more you speak to more interesting, fascinating people, the more they'll look at you and go, geez, this person knows so much or is so engaged, the more opportunity you'll find in the industry. It's that person you spoke to randomly about something at an event, and then a year later, they give you a call and they go, hey, we've got this great job. We think you'd be great for it. Something like that, So just keep the open mind is probably what I'd say.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you so much for all of that. Wowzers.
Sure.
What insight, facts and motivation. I don't know about everyone here, but my mind has been filled with a bunch of awesome content, which I cannot wait to leverage. But we have actually run over time. So I'll just quickly wrap up. All of this wouldn't have been possible without the input of everyone here tonight. So a huge and very special thanks to our incredible speaker, Damian Francis. He handled those questions like a pro. And I'd also like to give a huge shout out to our club VPs for all their effort to bring this event together, along with our many other initiatives. So Azair, Shafat, Atik, Vivek, Tejas, thank you so much. And everyone who's here today, who attended and engaged, thank you. This is our last event for the year. So in case we don't see you again, we wish you all a very happy holiday. If you want to stay in contact, we are always available to chat through our socials. And finally, we'll be sending through a post-event survey to make sure we are delivering valuable content to our club members. Thank you again for your time, and please do share our club's activities, such as our jobs boards and events with your friends. And yes, we'll also be sharing the Umbrella 360 competition event in the post-event survey as well. So thank you everyone for your time, and enjoy the rest of your evening. And thank you again, Damian.
Pleasure. Thanks, everyone. And please do feel to get in touch if you have any more questions. Appreciate it. Have a great holiday, everyone.
Brilliant.
Thank you.